Hello and welcome to our presentation on heritage as a design driver, the case of community-led projects from the Global South. I'm Hussein Bougdah, and on behalf of my colleague Maria Panta and myself, I thank you for joining us. Today, we look at some aspects of heritage that relate to the built environment and the communities that live in it, and how these can influence the way that built environment can be produced. Using two case studies of community-led initiative from the Global South, we focus on the role of the community, human agency and practice in creating community infrastructure such as housing, neighborhoods, amenities, etc. The paper considers the role of heritage as a dynamic and active agent of social transformation and community rebuilding. We start our discussion by defining heritage. According to UNESCO, cultural heritage is the legacy of physical artifacts and intangible attributes of a group or society that are inherited from past generations, maintained in the present, and bestowed for the benefit of future generations. Implicitly, in this definition, heritage has a component of context. It is well related to the place and the people who live in the place, and represents a continuity from past to present to the future. Tangible heritage includes buildings or parts of them, places of historic significance, monuments, artifacts, etc., which are considered worthy of preservation. Such objects have a significance to the archaeology, the architecture, and science of a specific culture. Today, we find that heritage is not only manifested through tangible forms, but also through intangible ones, which include voices, values, traditions, oral history, etc. From a popular culture point of view, this is perceived through cuisine, clothing, forms of shelter, traditional skills and technologies, religious ceremonies, performing arts, storytelling, and so on. So today we consider that tangible heritage is as inextricably bound up with the intangible aspects. For reasons of climate change mitigation or simply to improve their living conditions, communities around the world are taking part in or leading interventions driven by values, needs, and means of production that are part of their heritage. We will use two case studies, one from Ghana and another from Algeria, to show how heritage can inspire and drive the design and production of built surroundings that are rooted in the local context. Both examples are from Africa. They were chosen for different reasons, and the rationale for that is explained elsewhere in the written paper. They have different contexts, such as climate, topography, culture, etc., but share the way that each of them responds to their respective context. Our first case study is a community housing estate called a Xar in the local language, which means a fortified village. It is located in the Mzab Valley, a World Heritage Site in Gardaya in the northern desert of Algeria, some 600 kilometers south of Algiers. The climate is hot and arid, only tempered locally by the presence of the palm groves scattered along the valley. The Ibadi culture is a blueprint for a sustainable model of living based on balancing the three components: man and its values, the mineral environment, that is the land and buildings that are added to it, and the organic environment, that's water, plants, palm groves, etc. This translates to efficient use of resources, little disturbance to the existing context, and surroundings that promote the shared values. Historically, Bougdah is a typical Mozambique city, compact and organized around the mosque located on the highest point of the site as seen in the picture top left. Its buildings are made out of local materials and have small openings to deal with the harsh climate as seen in the top right image. The city experienced externally forced expansion due to what we term as oil industry immigrants, and its ecological and cultural balance started suffering with the invasion of palm groves with concrete buildings and the cars taking over the urban fabric, as shown in the bottom pictures. This situation that existed throughout the 70s and 80s led local communities to act. Local communities got organized, and with the financial help of both central and local governments, they set up some sort of housing development associations to deliver new housing settlements according to the traditional ways. This means a new self-contained XORs on non-agricultural land. Each XAR was designed through community participation, built and projects managed by the community through a project manager. Heritage goes to the heart of the XAR, from the choice of materials and construction methods to the spatial organization of urban and dwelling spaces to the financing of parts of the project and the provision of the workmanship, which is a form of a community rota to work on the construction site on a voluntary basis. As seen from the images, the architectural and urban qualities are similar to those found in the historic zoos, except for the concession to let cars in and the strict conditions of access through narrow gates. To summarize, the XORs are heritage-inspired design and construction leading to social, cultural and environmental well-being. They represent an efficient use of resources, rocky ground, local materials, compact design layout. They provide a sustainable way for the expansion of the city. They produce a culturally relevant architecture that promotes social interactions and strengthens community bonds. They offer lower unit costs compared to conventional housing schemes, about 28 to 33% of social housing and 22.5 to 25% of privately developed schemes. They also have lower running costs due to the thermal performance of the building envelope and the reduced need for air conditioning. Second case study is part of a PhD project into climate change resilience through community-driven initiatives. It involved the design and construction of a community facility in Abetenim, a village some 30 kilometers northeast of Kumasi, the second city in Ghana. The village is home to the Nka Foundation with its art village, which you can see in the top middle picture. The foundation was behind the organization of the design and build competition. There are also some experimental projects by Western donors and actors. As you can see in the bottom right, there is an example, which is a library. Finally, the local houses, which, as you can see, suffer from disrepair in most cases, as in the left images. Initially, the project that we had in mind for the village was to design and build a village hall, an idea developed by people who did not know the context, whether be it the local people, their culture, their needs, the resources available on site, and so on. Once being there was a realization that plans conceived thousands of miles away do not necessarily fit the local context. For instance, the community needed a canteen and kitchen for the local school and not a village hall. The project was an opportunity to deliver a community facility, but also to address some issues of perception about the use of traditional materials held by the locals. The project deals with both tangible and intangible heritage. Tangible as it makes use of earth as a building material, specifically the sun-dried adobe brick, and intangible as it considers the role of vernacular and traditional building practices in the way they may contribute towards improving the community infrastructure. For instance, by adding pozzolana into the traditional mix of earth and water, we were able to develop a type of earth brick relevant and useful for the local Abattonim community, with enough strength to deal with the worsening rainfalls. The canteen project was developed in consultation with and involvement of the community. The facility was more than a place for children to eat their meals. It is also a place where they learn to wash their hands before meals, something that is extremely important for hygiene and health, particularly in a poor tropical region with no running water. The canteen project was the design and construction of the Abattonim canteen was inspired by the local heritage, be it the traditional materials and construction techniques or the values held there by the local community. It helped to introduce a traditional construction technique that seems to have been lost in recent years due to the introduction of concrete blocks. Perhaps it is befitting to consider the following quote by Osei Ado. Architecture plays a critical role, as with art and the crafts, in developing an identity which in most parts of Africa has become an afterthought. If you look at this, it ties into architecture. Architecture is more than just edifice. It's about how you imbue culture and the spirit of a people into the built environment. Architects and architecture should be refocused towards culture and design. The design and construction. We have looked at two different case studies where the community, its values, and aspects of its heritage were behind some community-led initiatives. There are a number of lessons that can be learned from these two examples. However, for the purpose of this presentation, we will focus on 4 items. Number 1. Under the strain of globalization, communities are losing some of their traditional way of life and living know-how. Number 2. When presented with low-tech, low-cost, context-relevant and heritage-inspired solutions, communities are likely to buy into them. Number 3. Heritage-inspired design solutions can be made relevant to a contemporary context while keeping their cultural relevance. Number 4. Working with communities who have better knowledge of the local context than remote decision makers is a better way to produce sustainable development, including the cultural sustainability of communities and groups. Finally, a series of words that might ring a bell with some of you, particularly those of you involved into ethnographic research. The written version of the presentation will elaborate on some of these words in the context of the case studies discussed here. The words are local. What is local? Being there, unlearning, listening, open-endedness, unpredictability, uncertainty, and foreseeability, as opposed to autonomy, purity, control. Collaboration, interdisciplinarity. As we come to the end of our presentation, we take this opportunity to say thank you very much for your patience, and if you have any questions about the presentation or any of the issues discussed, please don't hesitate to contact us on the email address given. That is hbougdah@uca.ac.uk. Thank you very much. As we come to the